citizens are the least informed people in the world. Your average yak herder in Tajikistan knows who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. It's obvious. Does he think some skinny dude in a dress is actually a girl? Come on. That idea would never occur to him. You've got to be lied to at full volume over a period of years in order to reach conclusions like that. And of course, we have been. The media lie. They do. But mostly they just ignore the stories that matter. What's happened to the hundreds of billions of US dollars we've sent to Ukraine? No clue.
Well, that was Tucker Carlson from his brand new Twitter show that was released yesterday. Some 90 million impressions, some 20 million views. Truly an extraordinary opening, but it doesn't come without a host of new problems, as we learned today that Fox News has decided to introduce some legal challenges to the contract of Tucker Carlson. And here to explain and to dig into this detail and a whole lot more, I'm joined by Simon from Florida. Simon, welcome back to World Series News.
Hi there. It's been pretty busy. I was on InfoWars with Christy Lee on Monday, and I was also on with your colleague Jorge Morich on his TNT show last night. So we should explain to the audience the reason why you and I weren't on as intended with Alex Jones on Tuesday was because he suddenly decided to go to Dallas to appear on the Steven Crowder show today and yesterday. So that caused a scheduling conflict, and they have been kind enough to move us to Friday afternoon, my time, which will be 2 p.m. New York time on Friday, which will be Australia 4 a.m. But within 2 or 3 hours after that, then the podcast will be available, and we should be able to have some clips for our Australia Saturday morning show, America Friday night show, and failing that, then we'll have some stuff for the Sunday/Monday show. Okay, so that's the update in terms of our involvement with InfoWars. In terms of Tucker, he did that 10-minute show, which ironically 3 minutes of which were exactly what I had been telling Christy Lee the day beforehand. It was like literally like he'd watched that show. And he's now come a cropper of the lawyers from Fox News who have formally told him that he's currently in a contract violation, which, to be honest, is probably true, because he was in a fairly ironclad contract that he couldn't do any other media shows of his own origin other than being interviewed until January of 2025. Now, his lawyers have responded saying, isn't it ironic that Fox News are trying to stifle his freedom of speech? But if he's got an ironclad contract and they're still paying him, they may be able to enforce that. So that may be the last Tucker Twitter show that we've seen. We'll have to see. He didn't announce a schedule. He didn't say when his next appearance was going to be. He could have broadcast a 60-minute show, and he did a 10-minute show. So it was fairly kind of like hard-hitting and very critical of the establishment. But he's got a lot of legal problems, as does President Trump now.
Indeed. Now, I'm going to play a short clip of Tucker Carlson for the few people that haven't seen it, but it's an interesting take on his take on the media. We'll play that now, and we'll return and we'll talk straight into what's happening with Donald Trump, with new indictments imminent in the January 6 case. Here we go.
Have been. The media lie. They do. But mostly they just ignore the stories that matter. What's happened to the hundreds of billions of US dollars we've sent to Ukraine? No clue. Who organized those BLM riots 3 years ago? No one's gotten to the bottom of that. What exactly happened on 9/11? Well, it's still classified. How did Jeffrey Epstein make all that money? How did he die? How about JFK? And so endlessly on. Not only are the media not interested in any of this, they are actively hostile to anybody who is. In journalism, curiosity is the gravest crime. Yesterday, for example, a former Air Force officer who worked for years in military intelligence came forward as a whistleblower to reveal that the US government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems. Okay, that's what the former intel officer revealed, and it was clear he was telling the truth. In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't. The whistleblower's account ran on a technology website called The Debrief, which you've probably never heard of. The Washington Post had that story, but decided not to run it. The New York Times, meanwhile, just pretended it never happened. On the front page of the New York Times website this morning, there were 5 stories about Ukraine, as well as 4 stories apiece about Donald Trump, trans people, and climate change, the usual lineup. There was nothing at all about how an alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities. Not one word. So if you're wondering why our country seems so dysfunctional, this is a big part of the reason. Nobody knows what's happening. A small group of people control access to all relevant information, and the rest of us don't know. We're allowed to yap all we want about racism, but go ahead and talk about something that really matters and see what happens. If you keep it up, they'll make you be quiet. Trust us. That's how they maintain control.
There you go. It's
the obvious solution to that problem is for people to watch our show, because we're filling in all the information that none of the American media are talking about, which is exactly what I was discussing with Kirsty Lee.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I find that fascinating. I think it was a great opening there for Tucker. Now, with this, the contract situation, Simon, it's a case that he's still being paid quite handsomely for the balance of his contract. But one wonders if he was to give the money back or cut the contract, that would be enough to sever ties. You couldn't actually, I wouldn't assume then, if you're not taking any money from Fox and you've been taken off air, that you would then have to have a non-compete clause if you're not taking any money. So it just becomes a case here of how much money is enough in Tucker Carlson's situation. Do I read that right?
No, I don't think that is right from a contractual point of view. The point is that they don't want to have competition. His show had 3 million viewers. That broadcast that he did, which was only on Twitter, since yesterday has got over 70 million views. So they're terrified, and it could probably explain to a judge that they think he's going to put them out of business. And that is a legitimate economic interest to defend legally if they have a contract that says that.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't expect someone to have a restraint of trade that's not allowed to go on air for the business they do. But
well, you can if you're paying them $2 million a month.
Well, that's the point. That's what I'm saying. So if he was to reject the money and say stick your contract where it
I don't
fits
think
best.
he has to. I mean, he can give the money to charity if he wants to, but I don't think if they're paying him, he can easily get out of that.
My point is, give the money back. Maybe that's where it's going to go. I don't know. We're going to see what happens.
Once again, I think if they've given him a check, and even if he just says, I'm not going to cash it and tears it up, they're like, okay, well, we gave you the check. You're still under contract.
Gosh, that's interesting, isn't it? I would
consider that's why he's got a real problem. That's why, really, rather than doing his own show, he needs to be like interviewed by Rogan as like a quasi co-host, but he's not called a co-host, he's called a guest, twice a week or something. That may get around it, but he can't launch the Tucker Carlson Twitter show.
Unbelievable. It's just an incredible world that we're in now. And we're just seeing it just seems to be that if this was the trap to take Tucker Carlson off air, one wonders in all of this who really is pulling the strings, who really is in control. And then all the rumours start circulating that they're controlled opposition and CIA plants, and it just goes around and around and around. It's enormously frustrating. Also enormously frustrating to move into the next story is legal experts are saying that Mark Meadows may have outplayed Donald Trump and that a January 6th indictment may will be imminent. Simon.
Yeah, so as you can see from the time on that around midnight, there was rumours coming out that Mark Meadows had flipped. There's been a lot more talk of that today. Mark Meadows was his chief of staff, I believe, at the time when he lost the election. And so he knew everything that was going on within the Trump administration. And the suggestion is that he's now flipped and is testifying to a grand jury against Trump on behalf of the independent counsel that the Attorney General of the United States appointed, and that there could be an indictment within days, like this week, of Trump. And that is in addition to the case that he already has going on against him in New York, and the other case, which is moving along fairly swiftly in Georgia, which supposedly is likely to get an indictment against him in July or August.
And we still haven't even talked about the classified documents case, which is yet another one that's been lined up as well. And interestingly, DC Dranos tweeted today on that story that documents have been put out talking about the declassification of all this information, and wondering if that's what it was all about in another one of these cover-up stories that are continuing on. But it seems to be quite tough for Trump right now. Fill us in, Simon, what happened when he was talking about vaccines at a recent rally?
So he literally went to a relatively small, like town hall type meeting, and the subject, in like the question and answer session, a subject of the vaccines came up, and he started pushing the vax like really hard. People in the audience started booing, and he said that he was still really proud of that, and that he hadn't insisted upon mandates, but that was just his understanding that, as soon as a recommendation went out, it's like the international health regulation recommendations, they get treated as almost having the force of law by lots of county health organizations. And, when a CDC recommendation goes out, lots of states like California immediately put it into a regulation, and they put it onto all their school kind of like schedules for mandatory vaccinations. So the idea that he didn't sign a federal law that meant that everyone had to take it, he clearly should have been aware from other vaccination campaigns in the past that as soon as the recommendation went out, that for at least half of America, that would be treated as if it were a law. And so that was rather disingenuous. He then said that even if the audience in the room wasn't pro-vaccines, then over half of the country outside the room were very happy to have received them.
Such an odd thing to say, isn't it?
That just stunk. And everyone is just, he had carefully avoided saying anything for months and months. Mm-hmm. And all of that silence has just been undone with that reaction to the crowd response. And he just can't get it through his head that he basically, instigated genocide against the American people. And every time he mentions it, it's basically just rubbing their faces in it.
Yes, it seems to go at odds entirely with his support base, and one wonders if it's a form of self-sabotage one way or another.
Well, it was very interesting because Rick Wiles on his True News show, I think it was yesterday. No, it was, what's today? The 5th. No, it was the 5th, June the 5th it was commenting that he cannot understand how any prior Trump supporter who is anti-vax is able, this is now like the 15th or 16th time that Trump has made a pro-vax statement since leaving office. literally like 15 or 16 times in public, right? Plus, he's been refusing requests from other, significant GOP supporters who've been asking him to come out and say that he was tricked and he didn't really understand the technology and he relied upon, Fauci and all this kind of stuff. But he's just doing the opposite of that. And every time he gets asked, he just pushes it and recommends and says, go out and get your boosters. And I've had, 7 shots or whatever. And so he seems, what's concerning here really, I think, and should be concerning for every American voter, is it's demonstrating his inability to, one, admit a mistake, and two, to actually engage in corrective actions. And so it makes you wonder about all the other mistakes that he made, including hiring his son-in-law, that, he may well replicate if he does get re-elected. Now, in terms of these indictments, like his rating went from his popularity among Republican voters when he got charged the first time went from like 44 to 54. And they're saying that every time he gets charged, that his support base seems to solidify. But that isn't the case with independents. Independents are like, well, are we going to have we literally going to be voting for a candidate who can't campaign because he's in prison? These similarities with Imran Khan, as we'll get on to later, are really extremely similar. And, I feel kind of sorry at this point for DeSantis because he's running, frankly, quite a squeaky clean campaign. And yet, Trump's blustering is still consuming most of the media airtime because certainly, all the mainstream media love to hate Trump still. And so, anything that indicates his potential downfall, they are gleefully reporting.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Imran Khan, let's talk about him now. The former Pakistan PM, Imran Khan, has been booked under an anti-terrorism law after the murder of a Supreme Court lawyer. It just doesn't seem to end for Imran Khan. Tell us more.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of problems still going on. He just gave a 15-minute interview to Piers Morgan. He's got a hearing tomorrow where he's having the bail arrangements on 17 of the 150 odd cases against him reconsidered. And as he pointed out, he only needs the judge to refuse to roll over one of those 17 cases and he'll immediately be in pre-trial detention. His wife has to go for a bail hearing next week on the 13th of June. He today had bail extended on the state gift jewelry case, the Toshkana case. That was extended literally only 2 weeks until June the 21st. So he's not even getting like 30-day bail. He's literally getting like a week or 2 weeks. So that's why he has to keep on going back to court. And they're courts like all over the country. Now, in relation to this pending murder charge, he hasn't formally been charged with that yet. A Supreme Court lawyer who didn't like him was pushing for sedition charges to be put against him, which frankly was like a duplication because there's already sedition charges against him. Now, that man was, whose name was Shah, S-H-A-R, was assassinated by a drive-by gunning, 4 men in a vehicle, shooting weapons at him, killed him. And his son was arrested the next day. Other family members told the media that it was all the result of a family feud. Now, after he had been held by the police for 8 hours, the son came out from the police station and told the media that he had filed what's called an FIR, First Incident Report, in which he had alleged that Imran Khan had ordered the assassination of his father, and therefore he was responsible for the death. And it was indicated that charges will be pending, but not under the regular criminal code, but actually under the Anti-Terrorism Act, which would mean that once again Imran Khan would be facing the anti-terrorist courts, which, if I'm not mistaken, don't have jury trials because of the likelihood of the jurors being attacked. So it's just like yet another a case against him. He categorically denied any involvement with Piers Morgan today, and said that, you know, until this man was killed, you know, what this guy was trying to do was the least of his problems, given that he was already facing 150 plus cases, 10,000 of his followers are currently detained, and many members of his political party have resigned, some of whom have now actually formed another political party, which looks like it may take some of his support away, though he was indicating that in the national polls, he believes that his party have now got a 70% popularity rating. So that's like 12 or 13 political parties are like getting 30% between them, and his one party is getting like 70%, which is unheard of in the history of Pakistan politics. And his concern now is that because Mr. Qureshi, who he met with yesterday, the former foreign minister, is standing firm, and despite the entreaties of the new leaders of the alternative political party, the Movri political party, or Movli, they were trying to get the current stand-in for Mr. Khan should he be sent to prison, even pre-trial or post-trial. Qureshi is like his nominated successor. So those people were trying to pluck Qureshi away so that he didn't have a big name person to represent the party in the elections and hold the grouping together. Now, what he's expressed today is that, one, he believes that Pakistan has literally gone back to the dark ages, and that the repression is worse than even under military law during the 1970s or during the 1990s. The media are actually prohibited from saying his name. They're banned from saying Imran Khan for the domestic media. So they're allowed to say the PTI chief, but they're not allowed to say Imran Khan, which is just absurd because everyone knows who the chief is, right? It's just petty. Supposedly that's for trying to reduce internet searches. So if you put Imran Khan in, like, the story won't come up, but if you put PTI chief in, it will. So that seems very unsophisticated. But his concern now is that because his party is polling so high, and because he's got a good replacement if needed, that they literally, the military and the governing parties, want to actually kill him, because it's only by literally exterminating him that they've got any chance of performing better at the polls, if they even go ahead in October. And there's still a big doubt as to whether or not a nationwide state of emergency will be declared, which would be a legitimate reason to delay the polling date.
Gosh, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, when they go to that much length to censor anyone out of the business in this situation? I mean, so much for a fair trial.
It was interesting because he was asked how he feels about the international support that he's been receiving. And he said that he didn't have high hopes, but that it has been slightly disappointing that countries where he had a great cricket reputation, like Australia and Britain, have really been completely silent on his treatment or the treatment of any of his supporters. And he made the point and we see this time and time again, that all this bullshit about autocracies versus democracies, that as soon as there's any military interest, be it with Pakistan or with Saudi Arabia, then the most heinous repression of democracy is tolerated and not even mentioned, as long as the Western countries' other interests are safeguarded.
Okay. Now, I want to move on to, I think we'll start with the Arab-China summit, and then we'll extend to see in the lead up towards this, all of the activity that's going on.
Well, should we talk about Blinken first?
All right, let's bring him up. The story that came up, Antony Blinken meets with Mohammed bin Salman, the Secretary of State, shakes hands and holds talks with Saudi Crown Prince. And what do we know?
Okay, so they met for an hour and 40 minutes, which, as you'll see, is a significant time. And yet there were less cabinet ministers at the meeting than had attended the meeting the previous day with the president of Venezuela, Mr. Maduro. Now, the mere fact that Maduro was there, overlapping with Blinken, was quite an insult and a scheduling conflict that could easily have been avoided. Then at the same time yesterday, the Iranian embassy and consulate was reopened with great ceremony and like a ribbon cutting and like a parade and all this kind of stuff, right? Then straight after his meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, that lasted an hour and 40 minutes, Blinken went off to have this joint US GCC ministerial meeting where, frankly, the greeting did not look warm. I suspect that was because the American press readout indicated that he had raised not only Israeli normalization, but also human rights issue in Saudi Arabia. So that, I'm sure, really went down like a real stink bomb. And so while he was trying to chum up the foreign ministers of the other Gulf Cooperation Council countries, there then occurred a 2-hour conversation by telephone, i.e. 20 minutes longer than Blinken got, between the Crown Prince and Vladimir Putin. So that was like 3 insults in 24 hours. And then to top it all off, going on to the subject that you previously mentioned, the Saudi press agency put out a lengthy statement, a really lengthy statement, announcing that MBS was going to be the patron for the 10th China Arab Business Conference, which is going to be held in Riyadh for the first time, that will also be attended by the Saudi Arabian foreign minister and political representatives from every single country in the entire Arab League. So the Chinese plus 23 other diplomats, okay? So even though in theory it's a business summit, it's essentially like last year's Arab-China summit that occurred in Beijing in like, when was that? Like October or November. It's going to have 3,000 attendees. So it's an absolutely enormous event. And it gets announced literally while Blinken is sitting with the foreign ministers who will all be back on Sunday to meet up with Chinese businesses. So, I mean, that was just like, I mean, and why did that have to be announced today? Why couldn't it have been announced either a week ago or tomorrow? It was like really, really rubbing his face in it. And the list of categories of businesses is just like extraordinary. Energy, mining, agriculture, energy conservation, green, food, just like a culture, just like a huge list, right? And so, this looks like another massive win for the Chinese. And the fact that MBS, even if he doesn't attend, which he may not do, depending on the level of seniority that the Chinese government sends, but the fact that he's like the patron of it, Prince William being the patron of a charity, right? Kind of puts his name on it and officially endorses it. So that's the significance there. And obviously, that means that it has the Saudi Arabian government blessing at the highest possible level. Right? So you've got these 4 events, all of which could have been scheduled so as not to conflict with Blinken's presence. And it can't be interpreted in any other way than a massive insult to him. And even the Middle East media are commenting today upon, isn't it odd that Maduro was invited to be there like at exactly the same time? Isn't it odd that the Iranian embassy that was supposed to have been open by the 10th of May, they could have chosen like any day this year, and they chose to do it the day Blinken was there.
The nuances of subtle as a brick diplomacy is being played out before our very eyes, and it seems that it's only now that we can actually see as the power structures of the planet are shifting, and literally as it is. Now, Simon, the Emir of Qatar has gone on a tour of the 5 Central Asian countries. Now, this is not an insignificant visit, is it?
No, this is a major love fest. And as well as Chinese money, it's very interesting that because, they're obviously going to play a major part in the transportation from China to the Middle East, these countries, that he's so far been to Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. And like the press releases that are coming out are literally just like absolutely glowing. It's literally like, brothers who are separated at birth. And so in particular, it's very interesting that the Qatari news agency are putting out like pages and pages and pages, pictures and economic details and who he's meeting with and where he's going and what the trade was 10 years ago and where they see it being in 10 years time. It's just like an absolute love fest, right? So that all ties in with the greater Eurasian partnership in the new era, okay? Because after Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which is actually a confederation of 7 kingdoms, the Qataris are like the next richest. They're richer than the Bahrainis or the Kuwaitis or the Omanis. And the important thing to note here is so far the Qataris haven't applied to join BRICS. They haven't applied to join the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, right? And so despite not starting off with those organizations and building their business interests via those groups, they're plunging headfirst into the Central Asian region and kicking off dozens, if not hundreds of business deals. So it's very interesting because everyone, ourselves included, have been watching the applications to SCO and the applications to BRICS, right? But it just goes to show that even if they haven't formally applied to join those, that they're still doing deals and integrating into the greater Eurasian partnership, and that it's a mistake to assume that the only route into that is through other pre-existing organizations. And that, to me, is the most significant outcome of these highly publicized visits, is that you've got to look at more than SCO and BRICS. You've got to look at the multilateral stuff, that's being done by each of the GCC countries. So that would explain possibly what Oman is doing. It would explain possibly what Kuwait is doing. It would explain possibly what Iraq is doing. Now, the other news that we didn't put on our list, but I would like to mention now, is it's been announced that the Iranians are doing a deal to form a massive gas hub like Turkey is. And they're doing that deal with the Qataris, who are going to give them the technology, and Turkmenistan, who's going to kick off the supply. But also, Iran has got the second largest reserves of natural gas of any country in the world. And at the moment, they're so hampered by international sanctions that they can't even meet their own needs. And they've been importing supplies from Azerbaijan and also from Turkmenistan. Mm-hmm. Now, with this money and know-how from the Turkmenis and with the Qataris, who previously have not had a close relationship with the Iranians, this is another really, really significant breakthrough. And that would be close to the port of Chabahar that I keep on talking about. Okay, so that isn't within the Persian Gulf, that's in the Gulf of Oman. So there we see once again why it's so important, this naval task force, particularly between the Omanis and the Iranians, to safeguard their shipping, if in addition to the oil tankers that they're going to be having going into Iran, that they now have liquid natural gas ships that could go from Iran to China or Iran to Indonesia, for example. And we have to bear in mind that Raisi has just been doing all those deals with the president of Indonesia. So if they were talking about long-term energy deals, then that would be a huge ready-baked customer for the Iranians. Now, on top of that, just so people have an idea of how much diplomacy is going on, right? The day after the Arab-Chinese Business Conference starts, which is on this Sunday, the 10th of June, on the 11th, the president of Iran, Raisi, is flying to go to all the countries that have close relationships with the Russians. So he is going to go to Venezuela, and he's going to go to Nicaragua, and he's going to go to Cuba. So once again, we see all the BRICS and SCO relationships that were fostered at the foreign ministers meeting in Cape Town. Those are being elevated from foreign minister levels to presidential levels. Right? So, I mean, the Iranians are like really, really working this situation hard. And, you know, it's just more losses and more thumbing the finger to the Americans. So, you know, it just, you know, I don't know how many losses we're on at this point. What is it, like 10 since March the 9th or something? Maybe more, right? It's just like one thing after the other and after the other. And like, you know, if the Qataris are talking about building a gas hub in Iran, does that sound like a temporary de-escalation of conflict? It's not. You know, you're looking at least a 10-year investment with like 20-year business plans.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So this bullshit that the American Navy and the State Department is saying is, yeah, they're all kind of like, you know, having a chicken shawarma together, but they'll be fighting each other once they get drunk. It's just absolute bollocks. You don't invest billions of dollars in large-scale infrastructure projects, whether they're gas plants or ports or railways, unless you have a quite high degree of certainty that, one, they're not going to get blown up, and two, that you're going to make money on it.
Indeed. Now, Simon, to change gear, I want to talk about a couple of things. Matt Taibbi's done a new report on censorship yet again. Can you fill us in on what's happening?
Yeah, so he's been going through the Twitter files, and there seems to be indications that the Ukrainians were asking the FBI to ask the big tech companies, not just Twitter, but specifically Facebook as well, to actually censor American and Canadian journalists. So that is just like massively against the First Amendment, because it wasn't just cutting down the free speech of individual Americans, but actually representatives of what they call the fourth estate, right? So the mainstream media, and so once again, the mainstream media aren't really touching it. Poor old Matt Taibbi, having been, for most of his life quite a left-wing journalist, is now just regarded by some of them as like a anti-vax, pro-Russian stooge. But he's actually trawling through the internal records, with the permission of Elon Musk, of the Twitter kind of like misinformation and disinformation groups, which now to a certain extent don't exist. But I have to say, given the amount of shadow bans that appear to have existed today and yesterday on news organizations and journalists that I would normally just be able to put in their first name or part of their organization, yourself included, ironically, one has to wonder what's occurred since Linda, whose surname shall not be mentioned, but the WEF hire at Elon Musk's social media company. She's been at work for 3 days, and it's interesting that you now have to type in the full name in detail of a lot of conservative commentators. And some of them have very long names. And so, people literally can't remember, was that one written or the number one? Was it a Q? Was it an R, the middle initial? And that cuts down their traffic of viewership greatly.
Of course. And this has been the biggest battle of all, hasn't it? The entire censorship battle never, ever, ever stops. And one of the most interesting stories, just to put it all together, is what happened yesterday with the Kakhovka Dam breaking there. You've got the Western media saying that Ukraine are blaming Russia, and you've got Russian media saying that it was Ukraine, and then you've got Tucker Carlson in the middle saying, well, we all know that it had to have been the Ukrainians. Russia had no need to do this. So it's almost like you've got to choose what side you're on to choose what news you're going to accept.
Yeah, I mean, so there was very clearly a coordinated European and American, for want of another word, NATO media response to that news when it broke yesterday, early morning Ukraine time. And even Admiral Kirby, the Defense Department press spokesman today, was kind of humiliated because even the mainstream media was saying, well, it flushed the Russians out of their positions. It cut off the cooling for the nuclear power plant. They were in control of the facility, so why couldn't they just have opened the gates? Why do they have to blow it up and have that huge economic loss? It flooded thousands of citizens that had taken Russian passports in the last 12 months and damaged their homes. And so why would they do that to themselves? It doesn't make any sense. Similarly with the Nord Stream pipeline. And he literally didn't have a good answer. So whilst everyone's like, oh, the evil Russians and all this kind of stuff, so the official government position of the United States at this time is they don't know.
Of course, sounds like
but
Nord
in the
Stream all over
meantime,
again.
the European Union is like just flat out condemning Russia, pretty much everyone except Macron. And Zelensky is demanding immediate flood relief. And this is notwithstanding that they attacked the Ukrainians, attacked this exact same location with HIMARS rockets in November, and it was discussed that in the Western media with officials of the Ukrainian government that they would destroy this facility as a last resort. Now, it would appear that even though the economic cost was enormous, this was an attempt to distract attention from the spectacular and costly failure of the first 3 days of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And it literally served a minimal military purpose, but was a very successful distraction operation. And it's just staggering that it's been done literally to distract the international media.
It's just incredible how much more bullshit that we have to put up with in this facade of a conflict that is clearly now Ukraine. Russia is the dividing line between the unipolar and multipolar world. It's absolutely frustrating, and we've now seen the Polish missile that Zelensky tried to blame on Russia. Even Biden said the trajectory was all wrong, that it couldn't have come from Russia. So that's false flag. Well, that was the second one. The first one was Nord Stream, and now we've got the dam. So we've got three situations, and it's no wonder that Zelensky war criminal hashtag is trending across Twitter today, Simon.
Yeah, but it was interesting because Tucker, in his 10-minute broadcast, attacked Zelensky a lot. He said he was shifty. He said he looked like a rat. Said that he was corrupt. I mean, he really, really didn't hold back at all. And so, it's going to be interesting if there's 70 plus million people have watched that. Then that probably will have more influence than the 40-minute video attacking Ukraine and the perception that American taxpayer money is being misused from Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, where, of course, Trump's still facing more legal problems from that state. But today, she put out a long, literally like 40-minute video where she implied, well, she didn't imply, she just flat out stated that there were Nazis in World War One, which obviously was wrong. She also said that the S in the name BRICS stood for Saudi Arabia, and it doesn't. It actually stands for South Africa. And the logo that she's chosen for her program is the identical logo from one of the Ukrainian army divisions. So 3 fairly unforced errors, but otherwise a very, very long attack on the continued funding of Ukraine, with her making the specific point that its armed forces are riddled with Nazis, and what the hell is America doing backing Nazis? So, she really didn't hold back. It's like real full-on statement. And incidentally, attacking her fellow Republican very strongly, Lindsey Graham, who was obviously in Kiev meeting with Zelensky recently, and said words to the effect that he was happy that American money was resulting in dead Russians, and it was the best money the American government had ever spent. She actually showed that video and said, isn't that disgusting?
Now, we've been told that video was fake or doctored, but the point was Zelensky himself put it out originally, didn't he?
Yeah, but not only that, but that Graham has been going with John McCain to Ukraine since 2014. He's literally been going there 10 years. Yep. So it's not like some new occurrence for him. He's been backing a lot of these neo-Nazi groups, including the Azov battalion before it became a regiment and then it became a brigade.
Yep.
like even before it was integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces, when the entire global media was saying this is a neo-Nazi organization.
Yep. It's incredible.
So yeah,
Now,
so he's got a long track record of association with really dubious groups there.
look, there is so much going on. The confusion is the hardest part in all of this. But at the same time, when you dig down that little bit deeper, all of a sudden your intuition kicks in and the facts emerge before your eyes to explain that what you're thinking and believing in all of this is actually very, very real. It's been an interesting show today to talk about a bunch of different issues. A lot of people will be disappointed in Trump facing further indictments again, and also this obsession, it seems, with promoting the jab 3 years after the fact. One wonders when it is that he will either wake up to it or flip it on its head, Simon.
Maybe he's angling for an honorary knighthood like Ardern just got, right?
Well, that could well be the case, but who knows what's going to happen. It's enormously frustrating in all of this. The one thing we haven't spoken about today, and we might talk about it on our Saturday morning, Friday evening show in 2 days' time, a bit more about RFK Jr. And the inroads, albeit difficult, and what he's been able to talk about in recent times is certainly revealing. He's come out with another video in an interview, would you believe, on Mike Tyson's podcast, talking about what he knows about his father's killer,
which was deleted by YouTube.
Yes, exactly, and I've shared it on my Twitter page at JasonQCitizen1. Certainly have a look at it. It's 10 minutes. If you get a chance to download it, it is an absolute ripper. When you get into the info.
Don't forget that he also did that very long Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk on Monday.
Oh, he did do that. Yes.
Yeah. So that was. It started late, but it was 2:00 my time, so it was like 4 a.m. your time. I'm shocked that you didn't wake up at 4 a.m. to listen to that. But yeah. Fortunately, because we're 14 hours apart, we are able actually to cover all the time zones, which actually works extremely well. And people should appreciate that they're basically getting CNN international coverage without any of the self-censorship and lies, just from the two of us because of the time difference.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
I mean, they're not getting that from any other Australian or American only organization, because we are literally, you're waking up reading the Japanese press and the Chinese press, and I'm waking up reading the Middle East stuff and it's working very, very symbiotically. It's extremely cooperative and very beneficial for our audience. Now, I guess we should talk about what got discussed with Elon Musk. It was kind of like generally anti-vax, generally anti-Ukraine, very, very anti-censorship. That obviously they have a real common bond about, the two of them. And it resulted in a massive hit piece the following day from the New York Times. So RFK is still polling at around 20%. But when people are asked if Biden were, for whatever reason, death due to natural causes, or retiring due to health, or going to Ukraine to spend his ill-gotten gains, for example, right? That he wasn't in the running, what would the support be for RFK? It suddenly goes from 20% to 44%. So that's, quite significant. The other thing that we've yet to mention, I'll just cover very briefly, is a poll's come out that's been reported in both Time magazine and Politico Europe, indicating that there's a huge break on popular opinion between Europe and the United States on whether or not European countries should militarily defend Taiwan were there to be a conflict between China and the United States about the independence of Taiwan. And people from all the member nations of the European Union were polled, and the average was 62% of the replies from across the European Union said that if armed conflict broke out over Taiwan, that the European Union should remain neutral.
Wow.
And that's just extraordinary, isn't it? Because, I mean, if it breaks out, you're talking about American aircraft carriers being sunk at that point, right? And they're all saying, no, we do not want to get involved.
Yep. That's just incredible. Look, we've reached the end of today's show, and I just want to point out that Simon and I will be appearing with... look, unless, for example, a UFO was to land on the White House, we will be on the show with Alex Jones this Saturday morning, my time, 4 a.m., 2 p.m. Friday afternoon, East Coast USA time. If you want to check out also Simon's Twitter page for all of the news and whatever Simon's sharing, massive amount of information. If you want more details, there's his Twitter at Simon from Flory2. You can check mine out, Jason Q Citizen 1. Is my Twitter page there. And the other thing I'll just quickly bring up is my show is on radio 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Time each day, Monday to Friday. So whatever time that is, that's 11 p.m. East Coast USA. Today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. William Bay on his High Court loss yesterday. And I'm also going to be talking to Alan Hashem of Our Voices Matter on a serious censorship issue that caught him out, and he's got the evidence to talk about that. I'll be interviewing him as well, and a lot more details on the show. Having a lot of fun there on the radio. It's a different format, but it's also good at with World Series news, getting all of the details. Radio gives you something else again, and Simon doing appearances all around the world. So we're working really hard to bring you the news as we always have, Simon. I just want to say this, that it's the news that you don't get on the mainstream. I think we've demonstrated that and continue to do it. And Simon is just working around the clock to bring all that information. And if you're not understanding it and getting it, and we understand the detail, it is getting simpler, and the dots are really starting to join now. And you can look back at the older videos there if you want more information on the World Series news page on here, YouTube, and also Rumble. You just look up my name, Jason Olborn, for that channel there. Sorry, Simon, go on.
No. I was just going to let people know that in terms of future projects that I'm going through, I'm looking at the U.S. House of Representatives report on military steps that need to be taken to protect Taiwan. That document just came out today. And then there's an extremely long document from the Russians all about the U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. It's literally like over 150 pages. Okay,
wow, that's massive.
So that came out just a couple of days ago. I'm kind of like wading my way through that. Not sure if we'll do it on Friday, but maybe Sunday. So I'll try and kind of like summarize those two documents, so people will have access to that information as well. I've already during this week linked both of those documents to my Twitter account, and I would really encourage people not necessarily to follow that, because it can be overwhelming, because I'm putting out like 150 stories a day, but maybe go to it when you get home and you've had a beer and had dinner or something, and then literally use your thumb and just scroll through all of the stories of the day. But it was interesting and very complimentary when I was on with your colleague Mr. Moritz last night, that it was actually funny. He said that my Twitter account was now, and bear in mind this guy is like an ex-professor of international relations from Geneva University, that in terms of international news and hard to find stuff, that my account was now his favorite account on Twitter. And then after the news break, he had to come on air and correct himself and say that actually it was his second favorite account after his own.
Nicely done. Well, on that happy note, I'm going to thank Simon again, and also thank you for your participation, support, comments, likes, shares, follows, and all of the other info. The only way we win this big fat war is to become better informed than the others, and we continually strive to bring that news to you. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you all in around about 47 hours time for the next live show. Thank you.
Citizens are the least informed people in the world. Your average yak herder in Tajikistan knows who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. It's obvious. Does he think some skinny dude in a dress is actually a girl? Come on. That idea would never occur to him. You've got to be lied to at full volume over a period of years in order to reach conclusions like that. And of course, we have been. The media lie, they do. But mostly they just ignore the stories that matter. What's happened to the hundreds of billions of US dollars we've sent